Telecity won the Datacenter Dynamics Leaders Award for Environmental Leadership. Rob, can you tell us a little bit about Telecity's operations first?
Yeah, sure. Telecity Group is Europe's leading provider of network-independent data center services. We're operating 24 data centers around Europe and have a very extensive build-out program. So obviously one of the challenges for us is really thinking about the way we're managing the efficiency of that, particularly the power efficiency, thinking about how we can make improvements within the sites that we already have, but also thinking about how we drive best-in-class data centers for the future.
So what was your exact entry in the Data Center Leaders Awards actually about?
Yeah, so what we did as a company is set up what we call our energy management program, which is something that reports into our board, is chaired by me, which was really about looking at end-to-end through our business how we manage our energy. And what we did as part of that program was look at all of our sites. So formed a management board that involved all of the operational teams from around Europe, and went through reviewing all of our sites, looking at the practices that we could do within each of those sites, and using things like the European Code of Conduct for data center operators as a template for that, to look at the improvements we could make in each site, putting together improvement plans, and through that we've driven some significant improvement within those sites, but also then looking at the standards that we're applying to the new sites, thinking about how we can use energy efficient technologies within that, and that's everything from making sure that we optimize the free cooling through to things like white roofs on the data centers to reflect the solar gain during the summer, lots of things like that to make sure that the newer sites we bring through are even more efficient than the older ones.
What kind of size sites are we talking about here, and have you seen any real decrease in PUE? It mentions here that you're sort of working towards green grid metric.
Yeah, I think we see measurement as key. Internally we've been measuring the efficiency of our sites for at least 4 or 5 years now. And so we've got quite a lot of data that's helped us understand the differences between the sites. What we've done over the last 12 to 18 months is really standardise that, making sure that we have commonality between the sites. But we've seen very real improvements. And to give you an example, we invested last year somewhere over £1 million in cost saving measures around the sites, and we saw the payback on that within 12 months in terms of reduced energy costs. So we're seeing very real improvements within the sites.
You've recently had a new or fairly new data centre being built in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Would this have been, I guess, the ideal way Telecity would have built a data centre when looking at energy efficiency?
Yeah.
Would it be a good case study?
I think it is. I mean, that particular site, and that's the most recent one we've opened, but we're in the middle of a very extensive program. Over the last 3 years, we've effectively doubled the installed capacity that we have for servicing customers, and we have even more capacity announced. So we'll be growing our capacity from somewhere around 60 megawatts to over 100 over the next few years. Paris, as an example, really tried to take all of the learning that we'd got from operating sites over more than a decade, but also all of the things that we'd learned on the sites that we'd built over the last several years, and we really took as a fundamental starting point on the design there to make it as efficient as we could right the way through it. So that was looking at everything from the materials we used in the site, trying to focus on natural materials, thinking about the way the site sits within its environment, and particularly dealing with things like noise pollution, also thinking about how we could optimize then the systems within there. So on the cooling systems, thinking about the way they flow, obviously getting the temperatures right to maximize the free cooling, but also thinking about ways of minimizing some of the chemicals like the glycol within the systems to minimize the impact there. Harvesting rainwater as well. So again, the sites do have a need to use water as well, and thinking about not just the efficiency of the electricity, but also thinking about how we harness water efficiency as well. So all of those things were key design criteria for that site. So we started off trying to make the most energy efficient site we could, whilst not compromising on the need for that to be high reliability and highly resilient.
Your Paris website also has a climate change arboretum.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, however hard we try to make the sites efficient, there is always an amount of waste heat within there. It's almost impossible to make them perfect. So what we do on each of the sites is try and see if there's any way of doing something useful with that. Paris was a great set of circumstances where we were able to team up with a local research body who were trying to look at the effects of climate change on the Paris environment over the next few decades. And by creating the climate change arboretum on the side of the site, we were able to use the waste heat to give them effectively a heated greenhouse, which they can use to look at how different types of plants grow within that kind of environment, which will let them think about what are the right plants to be planting in the Paris area, to deal with what the temperature might be in decades' time. So it was a great opportunity to be able to team up with another organisation that had a need and where we could direct something that for us was a waste part of the product.
How big is your Paris data centre?
Yeah, the data centre in Paris provides over 6 megawatts of customer power. It's 3,500 square metre site, so it's a reasonable size, reasonably big size site.
What made you want to enter the Leaders Awards? Like, obviously you've got some great projects going on and a great story to tell.
I mean, I think the key for us is, we are a leader within our industry. I think our industry is at an interesting point where it's very clear that governments will need to regulate around power growth and carbon, and the risk is that as an industry we don't get out there the message of what we can do. And I think by adopting some of the great initiatives that are out there, and again things like the Code of Conduct, which are voluntary codes but actually are very, very practical and can make a real difference. But by adopting those things, we as an industry can drive our own agenda and really start to have an impact on this. And the risk is that we don't do that, and then regulators who perhaps don't understand properly what they're doing will simply impose things. So I think there's a real need for leadership in the industry, and I think that's why we were very keen to put ourselves forward and really share the best practice that we've adopted, and we're keen to share that and evangelise about that, because it's so key that as an industry we adopt those measures and really drive the agenda.